Hello, everybody. Welcome to The Future is Starting Now. My name is David Paskin. I haven't been here for a while on this particular show, and I was thinking that I would just hop on here, and share some of my thoughts about the shrinking or shifting of the American liberal rabbinate and what's happening. There's been a lot of news in the past few weeks, but I'm really, really thrilled that my colleague and friend, Rabbi Alan Litwack, is here to join me. How you doing?
I'm doing well. It's
Good.
always nice to spend time with you online.
It is always nice, online or on site. It is always nice. So, um, before we get into the specifics with you, let me just sort of set the stage. There's been a lot of news over the past couple of weeks about again, shrinking or shifting amongst the liberal Jewish rabbinical schools. There's, of course, been the news about the Cincinnati campus of the residential rabbinical program. There's been announcements by the Ziegler School of Rabbinic Studies out west, which is a conservative seminary. And just in general, there's been a sense that there's a lot of shifting going on. There's a lot of changes that are happening just by way of kind of
Rabbi David, we can't hear you.
I knew that. My bad. Sorry. Um, if just by way of setting the stage, if you look at the different rabbinical programs, the numbers of rabbinical students in each program has dropped pretty dramatically, with a couple of notable exceptions. The exceptions being Hebrew College, which currently has, I believe it's 75 students enrolled. The Academy for Jewish Religion has 51 students enrolled. And so another piece of this conversation, I think, is, what is the role of the monster seminaries, those that have been with us, those that have been the foundations of the American liberal rabbinate, versus some of the newer, I shouldn't say newer because AGR is actually quite old, but so the more off the beaten path programs. Last thing I'm going to say is I don't really have a dog in this fight. And that's because I didn't go to any of the schools that have announced changes. I did not attend HUC. I did not attend JTS. I attended AJR. And I've always kind of been an outsider to the movements. Now I'm very proud to work at a Reform temple and a Reform community, and I've certainly been very proud when I've worked at conservative in the past. But I just want to put it out there that I probably don't have the emotional investment that a lot of other people have in some of the announcements that have been made. Now, Rabbi Litwack, you are on the board of governors of HUC, and you were away last week. Was it last week? For 2 days or
Yes.
3 days. And you were kind of in the middle of this. Do you see what's happening in the larger American rabbinic movement as a shrinking or a shifting? Are we responding to a new landscape, or are we getting smaller and we're in trouble?
I actually think I'm gonna play the rabbinic card, and I'm gonna talk out of both sides of my mouth because I
Love
do
it.
believe that there is some shrinkage, and I think that there is also some shifting. That is to say that, and I think that they're interlocked with each other. The shrinking is coming from a I think this is not a new thing. People say it's COVID bound. I think, as with most things regarding COVID, it's not new. Whatever change happens was probably a crack in the door, and COVID might have pushed the door open a little bit wider. But in the sense of shrinking, I think it is a long standing challenge that rabbis have been dealing with for 100 years, and that is that this is a hard job. This is a hard life, and we are called to it in a lot of different ways. We feel that sense of responsibility and calling, but uh, it's it's not always such a great job for a nice Jewish boy or girl.
Is it
Um,
really? Is it really that hard? I mean, I'm not going to lie. I got it pretty good. I really do.
Well,
Now, granted, I'm not a congregational rabbi anymore. I did that for 20 years, but I'm not doing that anymore. I mean, is it really? Do we have it that rough? Is it that bad of a job?
Uh, look, I'm going to say for myself, it's not as bad for me, but I have a congregation that has treated me very well, that has respected me, has been great partners with me, has my lay leadership. I've never had somebody gun uh, for my job. Um, that isn't the case for all of my colleagues. That there are things that you say the wrong thing, you are on the wrong political side of the political fence, and congregations are not so forgiving.
Oh,
There's an
been there,
expert.
done that.
Yes, you have,
Yeah.
and so I think that there is. A, maybe a more realistic understanding that rabbis should have lives, and have families that need our attention. But we're still held up as symbolic exemplars of Jewish life and moral life. And when we fall short, we fall hard.
Right.
Uh,
It's like it's why did Moses get such a why did Moshe not get to go into the promised land just because he hit a rock instead of talking to it? Well, because he
yeah,
was that religious exemplar and he was held to a higher standard. So I
yeah,
mean and I think also that we're seeing a lot of people who are going into the seminaries are shying away from pulpit work. I know the conservative
so
movement.
that's
Yeah, I
yeah,
didn't get the notice, but the conservative movement apparently sent a message out saying that a whole bunch of you conservative movement congregations are not going to have a rabbi next year.
Yeah, that's where the shifting is going on. So I think that there's a shrinkage of number of individuals who are going into seminaries. I think the seminaries, we could talk about the challenges that the seminaries are having, and that there are less students, more seminaries, which makes competition greater. But I do think that the shift is that we find more and more rabbis who are being entrepreneurial,
Yeah.
and are not going the traditional route. And when I was ordained 26 years ago, uh, it was you go to a congregation, you're an assistant rabbi for 3 years, maybe 5 years. Then you go to your next pulpit, which is a small solo pulpit, and you're there for another 5 years or 7 years, and then you become the senior rabbi. That was the trajectory of a successful rabbinate. That's no longer the case. Okay? People are not only staying in smaller congregations because of the attractiveness of that. I myself am not in a huge congregation. I love the fact that I could pick out of if I lined up my congregation in a row. I think that I could pick 99% of them out by name. Okay? And there's something wonderful about
Right.
that, that I couldn't do in a huge congregation, just realistically. But I think that there are younger colleagues who are saying, I don't want that life. I want to be a rabbi. I want to teach Torah. I want to think about the future of the Jewish people. And I'm going to do that in different ways. Um, I think about some of the ones who are more well known,
Yep.
the E-Cars or Sharon Brous or um, uh,
Amichai Laulavi or yeah.
right, right,
Right.
yeah,
And okay, so rabbis are looking to or potential rabbis, the Erev Ravs of the world, are thinking about doing their rabbinate differently. And now it seems that the schools are also saying, in kind, it's time for us to start thinking differently also. So as I
yeah,
mentioned, out in California, One of the two conservative seminaries just changed his tuition to $7,000 a year, down from
Which, by the
30.
way, I will tell you, okay, was the tuition that I paid 26 years ago at the Hebrew Union
I
College.
know, it's interesting. When I went to rabbinical school, also, it wasn't all that expensive for me either. I mean, I remember college being really expensive, but I didn't. But rabbinical school wasn't. It was probably around $7,000-8,000 a year. Now it's up to $31,000, which is a little less, as I understand it, than it is at HUC. I'm
That's
sorry.
right.
No, I'm sorry. Sorry.
A little
More,
bit
more,
more.
more. I meant to say more.
Right.
HUC's in the 24s, maybe something like that.
26.
26.
Right.
Yeah.
Don't quote me
So
on it.
yeah. So we've got that, and then of course we have the big move that you were a part of, which, by the way, the misinformation on this was so insane. They are not shutting down the Cincinnati campus. That's not what's happening. The residential rabbinical program is closing. Now, I think that there are many people who are wondering, well, if that's closing, then what's going to happen to the campus? But that's
Right.
not for right now.
Right.
So, what was this? Without getting into any details that you can't share, was this decision? Was the mind frame of this decision? We need to shrink our program to save money, to accommodate fewer students, or was the thinking, let's shift the way we train rabbis?
It's actually both. The conversation, and I'm not sharing anything that was confidentially spoken about in the Board of Governors meeting. This is all was widely spoken about, certainly within the reform movement. It is both. The fact that we have three campuses stateside, we're going to set aside the Jerusalem campus, which ordains rabbis outside of the United States, but the three stateside campuses, to have student bodies as small as they were, okay, made the student experience less rich. I think about my own experience in my class, where I would have 7, 8, 9, 10 individuals in class, and we'd be discussing whatever the subject was. There's a richness to that conversation that you can't have when there's only three people in that class. So, on one hand, we thought about how do we ensure that the students have as good of an experience as possible. Having more students in less places was one of them. Then again, the shift, and this is a shift that you're seeing in AJ, not in AJR, but in AJU, um, the conservative seminary in Los Angeles, where more and more COVID helped us recognize that we can do online learning.
Hmm.
Right? Lots of universities Hebrew Union College is not new to this. It wasn't new to us before COVID. We had professors who were teaching in Cincinnati with students in Los Angeles or New York, because they had a bit of expertise that maybe a faculty member didn't have in one of the other places. But where we are, where at least the Hebrew Union College and clearly American Jewish University is heading, is to a lower residency program where students who may be coming to the rabbinate as a second career. They may have families. That was hard for people to uproot their family for a year in Jerusalem, as the Hebrew Union College required for their first year students. And then once they finish in Jerusalem, then to move to either Cincinnati, New York, or Los Angeles. And so if you've got children, that's hard. So what is the possibility to do something where things are online and where study is happening. And we use the Cincinnati campus, at least, as a place to bring those low residency students together, whatever. And there hasn't been a whole lot of final plans on that, but 3-4 times a year for 2, 3, 4 days at a time or a week at a time, whatever it is. Again, I'm not in charge of the development of the low residency
Yeah.
or hybrid program, however you want to
So
refer it.
that
But I
that
think that is a shift.
right.
Uh,
So it's interesting because that's a shift for the reform movements and potentially for the conservative seminaries. It's not a shift for some of the third-party seminaries, if you will. You know, AJR has been doing this for years. I remember that I was in that position. I had a job where I wasn't a rabbi, but I was playing one on the bima, and I had a fiance or a wife at the time and a new baby, and I lived in Boston. I couldn't move to New York. I just couldn't. And so what I was able to do was through AJRs. Back then it was they only had classes Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So I could basically train down Monday morning, shove all my classes into those 3 days, and then come back.
right.
And since then they've added online classes, things like that, and those programs are not really suffering right now. They're growing, and I wonder, do you think? Well, to what extent do you think them being more flexible? By the way, I should say that not HUC, Hebrew College is not really flexible, right? Theirs is it's a residential program. At least it always has been.
Yeah, I think
Maybe
there's
that's changed.
a different dynamic with Hebrew College. But finish your sentence as to the
All right.
flexibility.
Yeah. So I guess, but my question was actually, do you think it's the flexibility that is helping AJR and maybe some other programs thrive, or do you think it's the pluralistic, we're not attached to a movement, that type of thing?
That's what I think is helping Hebrew
Oh,
College.
okay.
Okay, so I think they're two sides of perhaps the same coin, in that we need to be more flexible. Um,
In how we teach,
in,
right? You mean
in,
in the
but I think as a society, um, people expect to get what they want, how they want it,
right?
and if I can't get it in this direction, I'm going to get it in this direction.
Right.
Right? And that plays to the denominationalism issue, that the difference between the conservative movement and reform movement, and for that matter, liberal Judaism, it's very minimal.
Yeah.
Right? So where am I going to be able to go to rabbinical school so I can get my shingle, hang it out, and be able to serve a congregation? And I think that students are in the driving seat because so many congregations are starving for rabbis. There aren't enough rabbis, and congregations are saying, um, if we can't get it from our particular movement, we need to be able to get it somewhere, which is what the conservative movement's letter to those, however many 80 congregations, again, don't quote me on that, but to their congregations, that you can go outside of the conservative movement's placement process. Um,
By the way, that is a I have a history with that because I am not a product of JTS, the conservative movement. I'm not a product of HUC, and so I've never been hired as a pulpit rabbi in a reform community. I was hired in a conservative community mostly because they were small and they didn't find anyone that suited them through and so they went outside the rule book and they got slapped on the wrist. They were told that, well, the next time you need a rabbi, you can't come back to us. Now, thank goodness I stayed with them for 20 years. So it was, it turned out okay. But I wonder if that isn't, one of the things I've been thinking about is, I think you're right that the Jewish world has shifted so dramatically. When you talked about if people can't get what they want, they'll go somewhere else. I think about all the B'nai Mitzvah, right, that are not coming to congregations anymore because they're hiring the rabbi, the cantor, the renter rabbi, whatever.
Right.
Not to demean them, but when you're in a congregational world, when you live in the congregational world as we do, they're taking our peeps. And so, but those Jews just found a different way of getting what they need. And there are some ways in which the conservative, the reform, the stalwart movements are shifting. And there are other ways in which, gosh, they just seem so stuck. Like that rule about you can only go outside if we say you can go outside to hire someone.
Right. And I think I'm pretty sure that it is going to be within your lifetime and my lifetime, since our lifetimes are pretty close, that we are going to see a coming together of liberal Judaism in the United States. Right? There's conversations about how do we share space? How do we
Really?
share resources?
That's fantastic.
And the only thing that is holding us back, right, is people's feelings about fiefdoms.
Yeah.
Right? They can't
Yeah.
get out of their own way.
Yeah.
Right? That as movements, I need to hold on to this, right? And at a certain point, we're going to discover that we're holding on to
Right.
nothing.
A whole bunch of nothing. Yeah.
Okay. And the earth will have moved so far underneath us that we're standing and wondering what happened.
Yeah, I
Um,
actually think there are good things that we should disagree about. That I think that like the role of halacha. Now, one of the things that I think the conservative movement will have to struggle with, that the reform movement won't, is there is not the divide between conservative and reform, but the divide within conservative, the divide between the rabbis, the leadership, and the Am Haaretz, the folks. Because while halacha, Jewish law, is vitally important, I think, in rabbinical school, as soon as you get out, it becomes a lot less important certainly to the
because
folks that you're serving.
that's right.
Right.
The folks that we're serving are in a different place.
Right.
Yeah.
So, okay, so I didn't realize that conversation. I mean, I had hoped conversations were happening, because I think that I looked at what HUC did, the move that HUC did. I look at the moves that are happening on the West Coast, not so much with the reduction in tuition, but with the sale of campuses and all of that. I think this is good, because I think that it shows that we are able to move, that we're not stuck. It shows that we're able to be responsive to what's happening in the world, to what's needed of us, and to what we can be.
Look, I will tell you again, nothing, no secret here, but there were plenty of people who, in the conversations prior to the decision to close the residential program in Cincinnati, there were plenty of people who said, why are we not closing two campuses and
Right.
moving to one campus? Why are we not thinking even larger,
Yeah.
even bolder? And we could go down that path, but
I mean, it's an interesting question, right? I mean, universities house hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of students. You take all of the rabbinical schools, put them together, all the liberal rabbinical schools, you have under 500 students. Do we really need five, six campuses, however many campuses we have for
well,
those
there's more. There's more
500
than that.
campuses? Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you feel like we're going in the right direction? Us liberal Jews, like, do we get it? Are we are, are we doing the work that we need to do to be the rabbis for the next generation of Jews?
I think that I think the answer is yes, with a caveat that that's probably um, too slow.
Mm.
But it's very, very hard to divine what's next. If we knew, if we could imagine what is going to be the future, then we can train for that. The problem is figuring out what's next.
Well, so
And
that's interesting because I'll tell you my perspective, and I mean, you probably know this from working with me, is I'm not interested in waiting to find out what the future is going to be. I want to decide. Let's
you
decide
want to,
right now. What is our
okay,
future going to be?
that's true, but I think that some of that is going to be spaghetti
Yes,
against the wall and seeing what sticks. Um,
absolutely.
but that's that's fine on an entrepreneurial level. I think there is a good deal of that happening in any. I can only speak for HUC, where we're looking at innovative programs and thinking about what rabbis need. I think about, again, where my father in law, who was ordained from the Cincinnati campus in 1963, didn't do a chaplaincy,
Mm,
a CPE unit,
right.
a CPE unit. I didn't do it either, but at least I had the opportunity to do it, and um, to talk about digital Judaism. Uh, that wasn't in my
Right.
experience, but it's in the experience of my younger colleagues,
Yeah.
um, and so I think that if we can keep an openness to trying things and being nimble enough to explore them, experiment, then yes, I think we're going in the right direction.
I also think it's important to acknowledge. I'm creating a few workshops that I'm doing with some congregations up in New Jersey about imagining or creating our future, and I'm using the Sinai. It's actually interesting that we're in the Omer. We just started counting the Omer. I hadn't thought of this, but we're using Sinai to the Promised Land as sort of the model. So you know those how we probably have them here at Temple Sinai. The tunes that have come me Sinai, right? The tunes that we've been doing forever. They're so a part of who we are that it seems as if they were handed down by God to Moses on Mount Sinai.
Right. Even
Um,
though we did them we started them like three
right,
years ago.
right,
Right.
right. But and God forbid we should change them at this point, right? God forbid. And so I think it's also important to recognize that we Jews, we have a lot of that. We have a lot of that Sinai baggage that is beautiful and holy and heavy. And getting us to move is not the easiest thing to do. Getting us to shift and change is not easy. And it probably shouldn't be. It's necessary, but it requires us to really push hard. And I think that's why it's maybe even more difficult for
Yeah.
for us to
The way I
accept.
think the way I think about it is that religion is by nature and design conservative with a little c.
Yeah.
That is to say that religion is meant to serve as a framework for our lives. Well, imagine if you have to change the framework of your house every month, okay? Or for that matter, every year. Okay, that's hard. Okay? We want to be able to feel comfortable in our homes, knowing where things are. If I'm going to shift around my house every year, I'm going to end up stubbing my toe an awful lot at night as I work my way around.
Yeah.
Okay? So on one hand, it's important because if my house doesn't get renovated in a reasonably, um, you know, consistent framework, then it's going to fall apart. Right? It's going to be outdated. The electrical will no longer be
Up to
enough.
code. Yeah,
Right?
up
Up
to
to
code. Yeah.
code. Okay, I no longer can. I can't do anything because I don't haven't put in Wi-Fi into my house. Um, uh, so I think that religion does need to continue to grow and develop. If it ossifies, then it becomes brittle. That's where I'm happy being a Reformed Jew. It's not reformed.
Right.
I bristle at that.
I know. Never went
We
to an
didn't change and
institution.
then stop changing. We
Right.
continue. We reform all the time
Mm.
because reality requires it of us. History, a
That's so.
society.
You know that I had always said we're not reformed because that means you went to an institution. I had never thought of reform as in an active. It's an active verb, like how Reconstructionists changed theirs to reconstructing Judaism. That is,
Reconstruct because they continue to
yeah,
reconstruct.
yeah,
Right? We have to.
yeah. That's very beautiful. There's a lot of reconstructing to come, I think. Before we started, I said to you that I don't have any answers. I just have a million questions about this stuff. And
Yeah.
I love exploring it with you every time. Thanks for hopping on with me.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah.
I, as somebody who has given a lot of time and a lot of thought to how we educate the next generations of rabbis, those who are going to take over after I retire, not in the near future, but some point. Um, I think about this. I want them to have the same fulfillment that I feel. And I think it's going to require us to change how we view our rabbis, what we require of our rabbis, both coming in and being educated, but also once they are ordained and they're out in the community, how do we support them going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got, I just want to give some shout outs here. Christo's watching. And yeah, we won't
I
call you
couldn't agree with you
reformed.
more,
Yeah.
Christo. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I just want to say a quick hi to Lauren, one of my dear friends who's watching. So look, that's what I got for you. I'm gonna try and come back on, friends, each Monday and kind of not look at the text so much, but just think about the future because it's starting right now. We can't get away from it. And I'm eternally grateful for my dear friend Rabbi Alan Litwack. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for inviting me to be a part of it.
You got it. Have a wonderful day,
Glad to be
everyone. See you
sharing the
later.
future.
That's
All right.
right. That's right. We're making it.